There is something hiding in these photographs that is so important to creating images that stand out in a crowded world. And yet, even though you're looking at it right now, you can't actually see it. A couple of years ago, I put out a video on minimalist photography and how we can use it to learn the basics of composition. But there was a glaring omission in that video. There is a simple phrase that we don't have in the West to name the very thing that is making these photographs on your screen hit home. Ma. You can see it everywhere in Japanese aesthetics. You see it in Japanese ink painting. You see it in Japanese architecture. And some have even suggested that it is in the space between two beats of music. Now, we might want to call that emptiness, negative space. But negative space is just the space in a photograph that doesn't really have anything in it. In Ma, that emptiness has been described as an emptiness full of possibilities, like a promise yet to be fulfilled. So what is it that photographers like Shoji Ueda have discovered in this aesthetic, and one that has influenced some of the greats of photography? And how do we put possibility into the emptiness of our own photographs? And by the end of this video, we're going to have a simple test. I call it the cover test, that will tell us on any photograph whether the empty space is working or wasted. Now, because we don't have this phrase or even this concept in the West, it's worth taking a moment to understand what ma is. It isn't a photography word. It's not even like an art word. It is an idea. The simplest way I can imagine this is to think about a conversation. If somebody stops talking for a second, you don't think, hey, nothing's going on. You think that person is about to say something important. It's that gap between the words. It's not empty, it's loaded. The Japanese took this idea and they put it everywhere. It's in traditional ink painting. It is the empty panel on the left of this image that isn't there just because they ran out of things to paint there, but it's there for a reason. It helps complete the image. It's even built into architecture. Traditional Japanese rooms have something called a Tokonoma, a little alcove, deliberately left empty except for one object. So why don't we have a word like this in English for our photography? It's not like we don't love the aesthetic. The difference is that we've taken that concept and we just flattened it in our photographs. The whole concept comes around to removing objects from the photograph so they are not interfering with the subject that we want to show the person in our image. We've treated this concept, this empty space, as something to be cleaned up, to have just a smooth emptiness, not something to use in its own right. So why this really matters for us as photographers, and like it's not just a nice little concept to play around with, is that there are seemingly two camps in photography that conflict with each other. Now, take a moment to think about this line from the famous war photographer Robert Capa. If your pictures aren't good enough, then you are not close enough. That implies you get in, you fill the frame, don't waste the edges. Make sure that everything on that picture is got something to contribute. Now, we can contrast that with Michael Kenna. He is a photographer who has spent 50 years doing almost the complete opposite. He, and I think this is rather lovely, describes his own work as a visual haiku. In his words, an attempt to evoke and suggest rather than just describe in detail. So he's suggesting here that we pull back, we don't get close, we let things breathe. So which of these is right? Which is the one we're supposed to use as photographers? Should we get close or should we stand back, leaving quite a lot of the frame almost empty? Because both of these photographers' work is held in high regard, and of course neither of them is wrong, this is where we start getting wound up. Because that contradiction is just part of that bundle of advice that gets thrown at us so many times. And we end up standing there looking at our photographs and wondering, is this frame too busy? Is it too quiet? Is it empty? Is it full? And that Japanese phrase, ma, is the key to actually resolving all of this, to understanding how much space we actually need to leave in our photographs. Now, on the surface, it might seem like the answer here is simple. Just leave more empty space around your subject, and that's sorted in your photographs. But it can't just be about the amount, because as we will see in Shoji Ueda's photographs later on, it changes all the time. And before we get on to Shoji's photographs, Michael Kenna is going to help us out a little bit here, because he's talked about some of the things that he includes in his photographs. He calls them pathways, bridges, empty spaces. He thinks of them as invitations, an invitation for the viewer to come into the frame, wander around by themselves. And I feel that is a good test. Not how much space is in there, but whether that space is inviting us in or just sitting there doing nothing. So let's go and have a look about how this works in a great Japanese photographer, Shoji Ueda. Shoji Ueda spent most of his career photographing on sand dunes near his home. And look what's going on in the photographs. The sand dunes are acting like a sort of an open-air studio. It's a blank stage where he's arranging people. Now, sometimes it's just a single figure. Other times, it's a whole family taking up, well, actually quite a lot of space in the frame. But what doesn't change is the background. It's flat. It's featureless. It really offers not a whole bunch of anything to the photograph, except as a background for the figures. But if you take away that emptiness, you end up with often maybe just a family snapshot. But if you treat that plain background the same way Ueda does, you end up creating photographs that people talk about for decades later. And in fact, in Japan, his style has its own name. It's called Ueda Tone. And he has a whole museum dedicated to his photography. Within those photographs, Ueda, he understands that sometimes you need a bit and sometimes you need a bit less. What is in there? It changes the way that we feel about his photographs. That empty sand is not just a plain background. It's doing real heavy lifting in his photographs. You're beginning to see how that space isn't just devoid of anything, but it's contributing to the picture. So we're going to come back to Michael Kenna for a moment before we move on to another Japanese photographer. And Kenna's told us exactly what he's photographing. He says he prefers to photograph the stage before the characters appear. This is another way of thinking about this concept of Ma. Talked about the idea of promise, of anticipation, that pregnant pause. Michael Kenna's photographs, those empty spaces are not just being empty. They mean something. Something could happen in those places. Now, of course, Michael Kenna, as you may have guessed, is not Japanese. He's British. And the reason I bring him up here, apart from the fact that his photographs are great, is that this rule, this idea, isn't exclusive to Japanese photographers. It is more about an understanding how that emptiness in our photographs can behave if we think about it in a different perspective. Instead of coming from a Western perspective and saying, hey, it's just empty space, it's so we can focus our attention onto the thing that we want to show, it instead goes, here we have a place, a stage, a area that fundamentally changes how this picture feels. That's what we want to do. We don't want to make obvious photographs. We don't want to say, look at how I put this person on the third, and it's nice negative space. We want people to react to this, to feel, to get a sense of the place, to get a feeling and an emotion without it being rammed down their throat. This is why the photographs will start to stand out when you let the image whisper. Now, talking about whispering and letting things stand out, we're going to talk about Hiroshi Sugimoto. Look at his photographs. Now, he goes further than both of the other photographers. His photographs are just basically flat fields of tone, these seascapes. And it's basically made a photograph that is completely negative space. There's no figure, there's no object, there's no nothing for us to land on whatsoever. There is simply the potential, the possibility within the emptiness. He's taken those sea views and those skies, two of the only things that have never changed in the history of the planet, and he photographs them in a way that actually doesn't tell us anything. It just promises a story. It promises that if we look long enough, we would find something in there. Don't get me wrong in this. This is not about just having white empty space. It is about having spaces within your photograph that alter the image. How are we going to decide how much space we need? There's a cover test. Now, these photographers, they have not discovered a trick. They have not discovered a filter. They haven't discovered a rule. It's nothing that you can apply to your photographs as, hey, I've got this thing, poof, and you pour it on an instant picture. All three of these photographers have discovered that the emptiness has the ability to play a role. That idea of ma, that emptiness as a promise. And it's part of what makes a photograph work. And if we come back to Robert Capa, Michael Kenna, there's two competing ideas about filling the frame and leaving space. How do we know which one of these two is going to work? Because they can be applied equally to most of our photographs. So the way that I find is probably the best way to do this is to take my hand, put it over something, block things out, move around. Does that change how the photograph feels? If I have less space, what does that bring to the photograph? If I have too much space, is the subject actually kind of getting lost? Is that space too much? It does come down to a feeling. We don't trust ourselves enough about feeling a feel in our photography. Try and photograph concepts, ideas, stages, and play around with the crop. If you are lucky enough to live in a place where there's, a grain silo or something out against a blank area, photograph it and try giving it different crops. I've spoken with this in some of the guys in the light table group that we run within the TPU tribe about cropping, about how much space is necessary in these photographs to allow that story, allow that space to have its own influence in the photo. And if that photograph loses something, the concept of ma, I find is fascinating when we apply that to composition in photography, because it means that we're actually making a great deal from something that a lot of us may have discarded in the past. And if you want to find out more about how to think differently about your photography, about to bringing these concepts together of Ueda and Kenna and Sugimoto, that they're not just giving us nice pictures to work, but a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world, then check out this video here, which I talked about with the composition and minimalism, and also check out the primer in the description box below. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I will see you later.